The rain fell without mercy that night, a steady, cold rhythm against the windows of a small apartment that once felt like home. Now it was just four walls, silent witnesses to everything he had lost. Ethan Cole sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the half-packed suitcase on the floor. His reflection in the cracked mirror was unrecognizable, unshaven, sleepless eyes, shoulders heavy with failure. Just 6 months ago, he had been a man in love and in control, a dreamer who believed that love could survive anything. But dreams, he learned, were fragile things. Across the room, a photograph rested face down on the nightstand, one he hadn't yet found the courage to throw away. In that picture, he and Claire stood laughing under city lights, their hands intertwined, a future bright before them. He used to believe that nothing could break them apart. But love, he now realized, doesn't always die with betrayal, sometimes it's buried alive by the weight of disappointment. Claire hadn't betrayed him, not in the way people usually mean. She had simply given up. When Ethan's startup collapsed and debts piled high, when eviction notices replaced love letters, she decided that survival mattered more than staying. Her final words replayed in his mind like an endless echo. "I can't do this anymore, Ethan. I'm tired of believing in a dream that keeps breaking us." She walked out with quiet tears, leaving behind the scent of her perfume in a hollow where his heart used to be. Now, surrounded by the remains of his life, unpaid bills, disconnected phone, and a silence that screamed, Ethan faced what he once thought impossible, rock bottom. He had lost everything. His company. His home. His love. And perhaps, worst of all, his belief in himself. Days turned into weeks. He drifted through them like a ghost, job rejections piling higher than his unopened mail. His friends, once loud and present, vanished one by one, their sympathy fading into distance. Society has a way of turning its back on failure. But somewhere between sleepless nights and empty mornings, a cruel question began to haunt him. Was Claire right to leave? That question stung more than any rejection letter ever could. Because deep down, Ethan feared the answer might be yes. He stopped shaving. He stopped dreaming. He became a man surviving on autopilot, a shadow in a city that no longer noticed him. Until one night, the night that would change everything. The storm outside roared like a reflection of the chaos within him. Ethan sat by his old laptop, the glow of the screen flickering like a dying heartbeat. He opened a message from a bank, the final notice. His savings account was empty. His credit cards maxed. His life, reduced to numbers in red. He slammed the laptop shut and leaned back, eyes burning. "What am I even doing anymore?" he whispered into the void. That was when he noticed the folder buried deep in his files, Project Haven. The dream he once built. The startup that failed. A concept meant to help small creators find investors and build their visions. He had built the prototype himself, once believing it would change lives. Now, it was nothing more than digital dust. He clicked it open anyway, scrolling through his old notes, mock-ups, and designs. Each line of code, each scribbled idea, was a memory of the man he used to be, passionate, fearless, unstoppable. And that's when something inside him, something small but fierce, began to stir. "They all walked away," he muttered, voice trembling with the edge of defiance. "But I'm still here." The words hung in the air, heavy and strange. He hadn't spoken with conviction in months. It felt foreign, yet right. He rose from his chair and walked toward the window, watching the storm rage over the city's skyline. The streets were empty, the world drenched in chaos, but somewhere in that darkness, a single thought crystallized. This is not how my story ends. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He wrote. He planned. He remembered. Not out of hope, not yet, but out of anger. Anger at the world that forgot him. At the people who left. At himself for giving up. And from that anger, the first spark of something new was born. A vision. A purpose. A vow. By dawn, his desk was littered with sketches, notes, and the faint scent of burnt coffee. He stared at his plans, crude, messy, but alive. He didn't know how he'd rise again. He didn't know where he'd get the money, or the help, or the faith. But he knew one thing: he would rise. Maybe not for revenge. Not yet. But for redemption. He whispered to the morning light, as if confessing to the universe. "You'll see me again, Claire. Not as the man who failed you, but as the man who found himself without you." Outside, the rain stopped. And for the first time in months, Ethan smiled. It wasn't joy, it was defiance. The kind that builds empires. The sun rose through the gray, slicing across the blinds and washing Ethan's apartment in pale light. He hadn't slept, but for the first time in months, he didn't feel like a ghost. He felt raw, alive, and strangely calm, like someone standing in the wreckage after a storm, finally seeing the world clearly again. All around him were pages scattered with notes, business models, and hastily written affirmations. Coffee cups sat like battle trophies beside the keyboard. The screen of his old laptop glowed with a simple phrase at the top of a blank document. Project Haven, Phase 2. He didn't know if it would work. He only knew he was done feeling powerless. Ethan left the apartment that morning and walked straight into the city, not because he had anywhere to go, but because he needed to move. Every street, every billboard, every corner reminded him of what he used to dream of building. It all hurt. But that pain, he realized, was proof that he still cared. He stopped at a coffee shop he and Claire used to visit. The same barista was there, smiling mechanically as she handed out cups to morning customers. When Ethan's turn came, she hesitated. "Ethan? Wow. It's been a while." He nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, it's been a while." He paid with the last few bills he had left and sat by the window. Watching the people outside, clean suits, laughter, confidence, he wondered if any of them had ever fallen as hard as he had. Probably not. But they didn't matter. He wasn't competing with them anymore. He was competing with the man he used to be. He opened his notebook and began to write. Rule 1: Never again let emotions blind the mission. Rule 2: Use every scar as strategy. Rule 3: Build quietly. Let success make the noise. The words poured out like vows. He didn't notice how the hours passed until the shop closed. Back in his apartment, Ethan spread everything across the floor: sketches of platforms, revenue streams, brand plans. His old company had failed because he'd built it on passion, not precision. This time would be different. He didn't just want to rebuild. He wanted to dominate. To make something so undeniable that every person who doubted him, every investor, every friend who disappeared, even Claire, would have to watch him rise. He renamed his idea, Haven X. It would be more than a startup. It would be an ecosystem, a platform for small creators, freelancers, and innovators to find investors, connect, and grow. The very dream that broke him would now be reborn, sharper and unstoppable. He stayed up 3 nights straight. He coded. He designed. He built mock-ups. Each click of the keyboard was an act of defiance. The city outside slept, but Ethan was becoming something new, someone forged in sleeplessness, hunger, and loss. By the end of the week, he had a working prototype. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive. Ethan sent cold emails to potential backers, dozens of them. Most went unanswered. A few came back with polite rejections. But one, just one, came back with interest. Meet me. Tomorrow. Noon. Daniel Crane. Ethan stared at the message for a full minute. Daniel Crane was an early-stage investor, a legend in the local tech scene. The kind of man who could make or break you with a single conversation. The next day, Ethan wore his only clean shirt and borrowed a blazer from his neighbor. He looked at himself in the mirror, tired, underfed, but sharper somehow. His eyes had that old spark again. When he arrived at the cafe, Daniel was already there, silver hair, calm confidence, the kind of man who'd seen the world chew people up and didn't blink. "You're Ethan Cole," Daniel said without looking up from his coffee. "I read your deck. It's bold." Ethan swallowed. "Bold's all I have left." Daniel chuckled. "Tell me why I should care." And Ethan did. He talked, not about profits or markets, but about purpose. About how creators, artists, and dreamers had nowhere to go when they fell. About how he'd lived that failure, and he was building Haven X to give others what he never had, a second chance. Daniel listened. His face unreadable. When Ethan finally stopped, the silence between them felt like a test. Then Daniel smiled faintly. "You've been through hell, haven't you?" Ethan nodded. "Good," Daniel said. "People who've fallen that far don't waste my money. I'll fund your prototype. But I want updates, and I want to see discipline." Ethan's breath caught. He didn't smile, didn't move. He just said quietly, "You won't regret it." That night, he walked home under the city lights. His phone buzzed with the transfer notification, seed money, just enough to restart everything. For the first time since the breakup, he didn't think of Claire with pain. He thought of her words, "I can't do this anymore." And he whispered to the wind, "Neither could I." Until now. He wasn't doing this for her anymore. He was doing it because he finally remembered who he was. The city skyline glittered like 1,000 promises as Ethan stood before the window of his new, tiny office. It wasn't much, cracked paint, flickering lights, and second-hand furniture, but it was his. His. And on the dusty glass door, a new name gleamed in bold letters. Haven X Technologies. He stared at it for a long time, running his fingers over the print as if touching proof that he was real again. Every morning, Ethan arrived before sunrise. The air still smelled of asphalt and burnt coffee from the street below, but he didn't care. He was alive again, driven by something deeper than pride. Pain had burned away the softness in him, leaving only clarity. He no longer sought approval or comfort. He sought results. By the second month, the first wave of freelancers and creators began signing up on Haven X's beta site. Ethan watched as each new profile appeared: writers, designers, coders, dreamers. He read every story. Every struggle. It reminded him why he started. But beneath that purpose burned something darker, an unspoken vow. To rise higher than the people who once left him bleeding. To become the man they could never control, never pity, never forget. One evening, while Ethan was reviewing investor reports, a notification flashed on his phone. "Claire, I saw your company in the news. Congratulations." The message froze him. For a long moment, he didn't know how to react. His hands trembled, but not from weakness, from fury and disbelief. After all this time, now she wanted to speak. He typed 3 replies. Deleted them all. Finally, he wrote, "Thanks. It's only the beginning." He sent it and tossed his phone aside. But as much as he tried to bury it, memories surfaced, her laughter, her warmth, her voice saying his name. He hated that part of him still missed her. Never again, he whispered to himself. She made her choice. He opened another tab and dove back into his work, drowning emotion in strategy. Months passed. Haven X grew, quietly at first, then exponentially. The once empty office buzzed with life. He hired a small team, 4 people who believed in his mission as fiercely as he did. Maya, the sharp-tongued marketing strategist who could sell dreams with her words. Leo, the calm and loyal developer who'd once been fired for standing up to a corrupt boss. Nora, the creative designer who understood how to make pain look beautiful. And Marcus, a legal mind with scars of his own, the kind who'd been betrayed one too many times by corporate lies. They didn't just work for him. They followed him. To them, Ethan wasn't just a CEO. He was a man who'd risen from ashes, proof that broken didn't mean beaten. At a product launch event 6 months later, Haven X hit 100,000 active users. The hall was filled with journalists, investors, and flashing lights. Ethan stood on stage, tailored suit, calm smile, voice steady. "Every creator deserves a haven," he said. "And today, we make that promise real." Applause thundered. Cameras flashed. Afterward, as he walked off stage, a familiar voice called from behind, still stealing the spotlight, "I see." He froze. Turned. Claire. She stood there in a crimson dress, confidence sharp as ever, but her eyes, they held something he hadn't seen before. Regret. "Ethan," she said softly, "you've changed." He gave a cold smile. "You were expecting the man you left behind?" "I wasn't expecting this." She glanced at the banners, the flashing screens. "You really did it." "I told you I would." She hesitated. "I didn't come here to fight. I came to apologize." The words hit him harder than he expected. Apologize? After everything? But instead of answering, he walked past her. "Apologies don't change the past, Claire. They just prove you finally understand it." She caught his arm. "Ethan, please. I didn't leave because I stopped caring. I left because you were breaking. I couldn't save you from yourself." He turned, eyes cold. "You didn't have to save me. You just had to stay." He pulled away and walked off, leaving her in the crowd. That night, Ethan sat in his office, the lights dim, the city glowing beneath him. He poured himself a drink, something he rarely did, and stared at the skyline. Claire's face haunted him. Not with longing, but with purpose. He realized her return wasn't a distraction, it was motivation. If she thought he'd risen far, he'd show her how high he could truly climb. He'd build an empire so vast she'd only see it from below. Weeks later, Daniel Crane called again. "You've done good work, Ethan," he said. "But you're about to enter a battlefield. Big corporations are noticing you. Some will try to buy you out. Others will destroy you." Ethan smiled faintly. "Let them try." Daniel chuckled. "I knew you'd say that. That's why I've arranged a meeting with Titan Global Ventures. They want to partner or compete. Either way, it's your move." Titan Global was no small name. They were sharks, powerful, ruthless. And their CEO was Victoria Hale, brilliant, ambitious, and known for turning her rivals into allies or corpses. When Ethan met her, she studied him like prey. "You're impressive," she said. "But you're also dangerous. That's what I like about you." Their partnership talks turned into long nights of strategy and tension. Victoria wasn't just smart, she was magnetic. But Ethan knew better than to fall again. Still, every time their eyes met, something burned, sharp, electric, uncontrollable. He couldn't decide whether she was the next step in his empire, or his next downfall. The night air was thick with the scent of ambition, expensive perfume, tension, and deceit. Inside a glass-walled boardroom 50 stories above the city, Ethan King sat opposite Victoria Hale, the woman whose power could either catapult Haven X into the stratosphere or crush it beneath her heel. Their eyes met over untouched glasses of whiskey. Two predators studying each other, equally hungry, equally dangerous. "Let's not waste time," Victoria began, crossing her legs, confidence coiled in every movement. "You've built something extraordinary. But to scale it globally, you'll need capital and protection. Titan Global can give you both." Ethan leaned back, silent. He'd learned that silence unsettled people more than arguments. Victoria smirked. "You're not easily impressed." "I like that." "I've seen what your company does to its partners," Ethan said finally. "You don't invest, you absorb." Her smile sharpened. "Absorption is only bad if you don't survive it." He stood, walking to the window, eyes reflecting the skyline. "I didn't crawl out of rock bottom just to become someone else's asset." She joined him, voice lower now. Then don't. Become my equal instead. He turned sharply. Equal? Victoria's gaze was unwavering. We both know power is never shared equally. But between you and me, it could be balanced. It wasn't just a business proposition. It was something more, a spark that neither could fully control. Weeks turned into months. Titan and Haven X merged forces for a joint project, Haven Pro, a creator funding platform that promised to disrupt the digital economy. Late nights turned into whispered conversations over wine, then into something unspoken, a current of attraction masked as strategy. Victoria was intoxicating, sharp as a blade, seductive as a secret. She challenged him, questioned him, mirrored his darkness. Sometimes Ethan wondered if she was the woman he needed, or the final test before destruction. He'd wake up some mornings with her beside him, sunlight spilling across tangled sheets and blueprints scattered across the bed. And for fleeting moments, he'd almost believe he'd found peace again. But peace and power rarely coexist. One evening, Maya stormed into his office, face pale. "Ethan, you need to see this." She placed a folder on his desk, internal Titan documents, leaked through a source. At the top, in bold letters. Acquisition Strategy, Phase 2, Absorption of Haven X Assets. His blood turned to ice. He read line after line, contracts rewritten, leadership transitions planned, his shares diluted through backdoor clauses. Victoria had been planning it all along. "Maya," he said quietly, "who else knows?" "Just me and Leo. We thought you should see it first." Ethan's jaw tightened. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stared out the window, his reflection fractured by the city lights. Then he whispered, "Prepare everything. We're not going to fight back, we're going to win." Over the next 72 hours, Ethan worked like a man possessed. He reviewed every clause, every deal, every hidden exit. Victoria thought she was playing chess, but she'd forgotten one thing: she taught him the board. Through strategic leaks, anonymous investor calls, and quiet buybacks using proxy firms, Ethan began reclaiming his company, piece by piece. At the same time, he prepared the launch of Haven Sovereign, a completely independent platform powered by decentralized architecture, immune to corporate takeovers. The announcement was set for midnight. Victoria arrived at his office before the press conference. The door slammed open. "What the hell are you doing?" she demanded. Ethan didn't look up. "Taking back what's mine. You can't walk away from Titan. We own 49%. "Correction," he said, tossing her a folder. "You did. Not anymore." She flipped through the documents, eyes widening. You sold my shares?" "Technically," he said calmly, "I bought them. Through your own shell companies. Congratulations, you just helped fund my escape." For the first time, Victoria Hale, the woman who broke billionaires, looked stunned. Her voice softened. "I underestimated you." He met her gaze, cold but almost sorrowful. "Everyone does, until it's too late." She stepped closer. "You didn't have to do this. We could have built something unstoppable." "We did," he said. "But it wasn't us who built it, it was me." Victoria reached for his hand. "Ethan." He stepped back. "Goodbye, Victoria." And with that, he walked out, into a room full of flashing cameras and applause as the press hailed Haven Sovereign as the world's first fully creator-owned digital empire. A week later, Ethan attended a charity gala, the same one where, years ago, he'd once stood broke and humiliated. The chandeliers glittered like 1,000 ghosts watching his return. Across the room, he saw two familiar faces, Daniel Crane, proud and nodding, and Claire, standing near the balcony, eyes filled with emotion. When she approached, it wasn't awkward. It was quiet, inevitable. "You won," she said softly. "No," he replied. "I survived." "Is there a difference?" He thought for a moment. "There used to be." She smiled faintly. I heard about Victoria. She got what she wanted, he said. Just not from me. Claire looked away, then back at him. Ethan. I never stopped believing you'd rise. I just didn't think it would cost you so much. He gave a sad smile. Everything worth having costs something. They stood in silence, two souls linked by pain and history. Then she whispered, "Do you ever miss who you were?" He looked out at the skyline, the empire he'd built from the ashes. "Every day," he said. "But I don't regret who I became." The gala ended with his speech, brief, powerful, unforgettable. To everyone who's ever been broken, thank you. Because without you, there'd be no reason to rise. Pain is the greatest teacher, and revenge, the sweetest form of peace. Applause echoed through the hall. But as Ethan walked off stage, his expression wasn't one of triumph. It was quiet, thoughtful. Revenge had given him power, but not peace. Perfect. Here is the final chapter, emotional, reflective, and cinematic, closing from heartbreak to CO, the ultimate comeback love story with power and grace. The world now knew the name Ethan King. To millions, he was a symbol, the man who turned heartbreak into an empire, who rose from ruin to rewrite his fate. But behind the headlines and wealth, there lived a quieter truth, one that whispered louder each night when the applause faded. The penthouse was everything he once dreamed of: marble floors, glass walls, a view that stretched into forever. Yet it felt empty. He often stood by the window, whiskey untouched, watching the city pulse below. He built this skyline with his ambition, yet sometimes, it felt like a monument to loneliness. He could have anything now, but not the one thing he'd lost: peace. Success had avenged his past, but it hadn't healed it. He thought of Claire again, the laughter, the warmth, the woman who once believed in him when no one else did. And for the first time in years, the memory didn't hurt. It simply existed. He whispered into the quiet, "Thank you for leaving. Because without that pain, I'd never have found my purpose." And somehow, he meant it. Under Ethan's leadership, Haven's Sovereign evolved into a movement, a digital ecosystem where creators owned their freedom. No ads. No middlemen. Just pure artistry rewarded on merit. He set up mentorship programs, funded young innovators, and spoke at universities about turning pain into fuel. Whenever someone asked what drove him, he'd answer, "Love, even the broken kind. Especially the broken kind." Because he'd come to understand that revenge had been the fire that forged him, but love, even in its loss, had been the spark that started it all. One afternoon, years later, Ethan attended an event where he was to give a keynote on resilience. As he exited the stage, shaking hands and smiling for cameras, he saw a familiar face in the crowd: Claire. Time had softened her features, but her eyes were still the same, bright, searching. When their eyes met, the world seemed to pause. She walked toward him slowly. "You look different," she said. "So do you," he replied, smiling faintly. "I read about everything you've done. You really built an empire." He chuckled softly. "From rock bottom, yeah." Claire hesitated. "I always wondered if you hated me." "I did," he said honestly. "But I don't anymore." She nodded, eyes glistening. "Good. Because the man I knew, he wasn't meant to stay broken." They stood in silence, 1,000 unspoken words between them. Finally, Ethan said, "You were right about one thing. I did have to save myself." She smiled. "And you did." Later that night, Ethan returned to his penthouse, the city glowing like embers below. He sat at his desk, opened his journal, and wrote a single line. "Revenge built my empire. Love taught me how to keep it." He closed the book and exhaled deeply, as though releasing the last ghost from his chest. The weight was gone. He had become everything they said he couldn't be, but more importantly, he had become the man he once needed. Months later, Ethan stood before a crowd of young entrepreneurs at a Haven X summit. No suits this time. No rehearsed speech. Just raw honesty. He said. When I hit rock bottom, I thought my story was over. But rock bottom isn't the end, it's the beginning. Every betrayal, every heartbreak, every sleepless night, they were building something I couldn't see yet. The pain was shaping me into someone unstoppable. He paused, scanning the crowd, eyes filled with dreamers, fighters, believers. Don't run from your pain, he continued. Use it. Because one day, the world will look at your scars and call them your crown. The audience rose to their feet, thunderous applause echoing through the hall. And as Ethan stepped off the stage, he smiled, not the cold smirk of revenge, but the calm joy of a man finally free. Weeks later, Maya found a sealed letter in Ethan's office. It was addressed simply, to the one who broke me and made me whole. Inside, it read, I once thought love was my weakness. Now I know it was my foundation. Every empire needs something pure at its core, and mine was you. So wherever you are, thank you. You were the reason I fell, and the reason I learned to rise. He signed it, folded it carefully, and placed it in his desk drawer, not to send, but to remember. Years later, the world would speak of Ethan King, the CEO who turned pain into power. But those who truly knew him, his team, his friends, the ones who saw his journey, would remember something deeper. Not the empire. Not the wealth. But the heart behind it all, the man who refused to stay broken. Because in the end, it wasn't revenge that defined him. It was resilience. It was love. Sometimes, the greatest revenge is simply becoming everything they said you couldn't be, and doing it with love still in your heart. If this story touched your soul, subscribe to Whispers of Love by Casi, where stories of heartbreak, hope, and redemption remind us that even the deepest pain can lead to the most powerful love. Because every broken heart has an empire waiting to rise.